Hey everyone, welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. A few weeks ago, we tried something very different on the channel. Instead of using nonverbal communication and body language to look at clips in the news or during a trial and trying to figure out what people are concealing or what they're really thinking, we looked at an example of real emotion, something that really came through as authentic. This was an American Idol audition of a young musician named Iam Tongi from Kahuku, Hawaii. And it was such a great example of what real emotion is supposed to look like non-verbally. It was so real that we could see the judges feeling it and we could see their real emotions. And that was a big part of the reason that the clip went mega viral. It made headlines all over the world. Since that audition, the name Iam Tongi has grown massively all over the world, getting reactions from media and celebrities like musical artist Jelly Roll, who took that clip and went on Joe Rogan, the most successful podcast in the world, and they were both reacting deeply emotionally the same way the judges were and the same way audiences all over the world have reacted to this.
He's just good, man.
That's so good.
I'm like,
He's 18?
he's 18, dude. I'm finna meet this kid this weekend, and I'm literally to the moon about it.
Holy shit, is he good?
I've
That's crazy.
And just a few days ago, I was ecstatic to find out that Iam Tongi went on to win American Idol Season 21, which is an amazing accomplishment for such a talented artist.
Iam Tongi!
Now, the night of his victory, Iam performed the song from his audition once again, but as a duet with the original writer of the song, James Blunt. And immediately the internet reacted because there were a lot of things in the mannerisms, in the demeanor, in the energy, and in the nonverbal communication that caused a lot of controversy and debate on social media. The clip went instantly viral. Within a couple of hours of its release, it was being watched all over the world. And I was surprised to see that a lot of the headlines were saying that they weren't understanding or feeling what James Blunt was doing in this performance. And then there were a lot of other people saying that this performance was even more emotionally impactful for them than the original performance. And there's reasons for that as well. And in this video, I want to look at that performance. And we're going to look at the nonverbal communication of both these individuals, Iam Tongi as well as James Blunt. And once again, I'm not only going to be looking at this as a body language analyst, I'm also going to be looking at this as someone who has enormous experience on stage and on competition shows as well. As mentioned in my previous video, I've done 6 of these reality competition shows, and I have a very close friend who has won America's Got Talent. I've consulted on dozens of acts on reality shows like this, and from a performance standpoint, there's quite a few things happening here that are really interesting as well. Now, the format of this analysis is also going to be different from other videos we've done on the channel. Because I don't want to break up this performance and take away from the purity of it as a whole, I'm not going to play any audio clips. I'm just going to focus on the body language. So I'm going to show you clips as I talk about this of what we saw, but I'm not going to play the clips. And after we've looked at the nonverbal communication, you can go and watch the performance as a whole with this information now in mind, and I think it'll just make the experience so much better to see the whole thing after the analysis. So let's begin where the performance begins. It's just the two of them standing on stage, center stage. There's no band on stage, it's just them. And they're also both missing something that they always have on stage. And I'm sure a lot of you noticed that, and we'll circle back to that in just a minute, but try to think about what that is. What is it that they don't have that they normally have? And it starts with James Blunt singing. He's the one who says the first line. And there's something we see instantly that's quite noticeable. And it's the fact that his eyes are fixated on one spot. And you could tell this by the fact that even when his head is moving like this, his eyes are like just staying right in place. And this is something that we often see with performers who are a little bit nervous. Comfortable performers scan the audience, they make eye contact, they react, they might smile. But often when we're nervous, we just fixate one spot so that we don't really have to see different people and have too much input coming in. Now, this isn't the only sign from James Blunt that we're going to see throughout this performance that suggests a little bit of stress or a little bit of tension. But you might ask yourselves, why would such an accomplished performer be stressed during a performance like this? So we're going to cover this a lot throughout this video, But let's start by talking about that right now. So James Blunt is, yes, a very accomplished musician. He's a terrific lyricist. He's very talented with several instruments, but he's not known for his insanely energetic performances, right? When you think of great performers, you don't necessarily think of James Blunt, but when you think of great musicians or lyricists, you do. Take that and add to it the fact that he's singing a very vulnerable song, a very meaningful, emotionally song, something he wrote for his father when his father was sick. And if you look at the original music video of this song, it's literally just him at a table, super close, looking right at the camera and singing this. So this is very baseline for him, just staring at one point and feeling the emotion of these lyrics. That's how he best communicates this song. That's what this song means to him. So we're not seeing anything too different here from the original video. Now, as the performance continues, we see quite a few things with his hands and on his face that are really significant. First, with the face, we see quite a few times throughout the performance, the chin is quivering to where we could even see it in the teeth open and close, open and close. When we're flooded with emotion, particularly sadness, the chin tends to quiver. It's also something that happens before or while we are crying. And it's not something that's very easy to fake. It's just that emotion taking over. It's that emotional overload. Also, several times throughout this performance, we see his eyebrows do exactly what they should during sadness. So sadness is one of the universal expressions of emotion. In other words, pretty much anywhere in the world, you will see people express sadness the same way, and it has a very high recognizability rate anywhere in the world. And besides the droopiness that we see in the face, a telltale sign is in the eyebrows. When the inner corners of the eyebrows come together and go up like this. The outer corners don't. So it's not like surprise or fear when the eyebrows just go up. It's just those inner corners go up while the outer corners stay down. And this is not something that's easy to fake. Very few people can actually fake this. So it's one of the things we look for in body language analysis to know when someone's actually experiencing sadness. Now, if it's not there, it doesn't mean the person's not sad. It's possible to be sad without that happening. But when that happens, that's real sadness. So in this performance, James Blunt is actually expressing real sadness. These are not things that are easy to fake. But if we look at his hands, it's really interesting what's going on there. First of all, he has a couple of gestures that are very brisk. They're very quick kind of gestures. And this is the opposite of relaxed, right? When we're relaxed, there's generally a calmer flow to our movements. When we're tense or when we're stressed, we tend to move more in faster, quicker motions. So we're seeing those kind of fast motions in his hands as he's singing, but also when he drops his hands, pay attention to what's going on. The hand that has the microphone, we could see his fingers kind of moving around like this as he's holding the mic. There are moments where we could see the mic even quivering, shaking, so the hand is shaking. And if we look at the left hand, we're seeing a lot of stuff with the fingers. Quite often his thumb and index are touching like this. We can see those fingers coming in, and we're seeing these little rubbing motions very frequently on both hands. Now, in the research and literature on nonverbal communication, there are a lot of different words to denote these kinds of gestures. Rubbing or massaging type gestures in moments of stress. So they're often called adapters because we're adapting to stress. They're often called manipulators because we're manipulating a certain part of our body. They're called self-soothing gestures. But ex-FBI interrogator and best-selling author of the book, What Everybody Is Saying, Joe Navarro, calls these gestures pacifiers. By the way, this is an incredible book for anyone who wants to learn body language and nonverbal communication, to know what people around you are thinking. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can get this. But the bottom line is, he refers to these gestures as pacifiers. And I think it's such a great term, especially in this context. Because what does a pacifier do? Think about a pacifier for a baby. It's an object that the baby uses to reduce stress or tension. Now, the reason I think pacifier is a really great term to use in this case is because both Iam and James don't have something on stage that they normally have, and that is usually an extremely effective pacifier for any musician, and that is their instrument. You'll notice that in most cases, when Iam is performing, he's holding his guitar. James Blunt is either holding a guitar or sitting at a piano. I've seen a lot of live performances of James Blunt, and I don't think I've seen one. I'm sure it exists, but I haven't seen one that I can recall where he was just standing there singing. He normally has an instrument in his hands. Now, this lack of something in the hands while we're on stage is something that I could personally relate to enormously. So as a professional mentalist, and before that, a magician for years, I'm very used to having props with me on stage. So whether it's a pad of paper that I'm going to give to someone to make a drawing on, or a book that I'm going to have someone think of a word from, or a deck of cards that I'm going to use to have somebody think of a card, we're very used to having things in our hands, mentalists and magicians. And very often, if you look at a magician or a mentalist, between acts, between the tricks, you see that we're doing something with our hands. It could be like massaging like this, or exactly like James Blunt, like this with the hands, because we're feeling that nervousness of not having our props, which is where a lot of our confidence comes from. And for James Blunt, I would bet it's the same. He's a very accomplished musician, and I bet that when he has his piano or his guitar, he feels more comfortable. He knows what to do with his hands. In this case, he's not that used to performing this way. So the hands have to do something, so we're seeing these little pacifying gestures. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the man of the hour, Iam Tongi. And I'm not going to spend too much time in this video looking at his facial expressions of sadness throughout this performance. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think you need a behavioral analyst to tell you that he's experiencing sadness throughout this performance. I think anyone with even zero experience in body language knows exactly what's going on here. But I do want to talk about holding back sadness. So in his initial audition, we talked about a lot of things that he was doing non-verbally to hold back sadness because he didn't want to display it. He didn't want to put it out there. He was trying to hold it in. During this performance with James Blunt, he wasn't as effective. The attempts were there, but there was one moment that broke my heart. So as he's singing, he's trying to smile, he's trying to keep it together, but when it comes to the line, "It's my turn to chase the monsters away," he loses it. He wipes his face, the tears come in, he breaks down, and the reason I know that this is such a real emotion for him is because he turns to James in a moment of complete desperation, like, "You got to help me out here. Like get to your line. I can't get through the rest of this." And that moment, it hit me like an arrow to the heart because he's out, he's done. He just can't get those words out. But let's talk about why. Why in this performance, Iam couldn't hold back the sadness, but in his initial audition, he was able to do it quite effectively and get through almost the entire song and only cracked a little bit right at the end. Whereas in this one, he's having a much harder time. I think there are 5 potential reasons that he is more emotional or surrendering more to emotion in this performance than in the initial audition. And I don't necessarily think it's just one of these 5 reasons. I think it's a combination of all 5. So let's do this. Take a second and think about it. Think about why you believe he would be more emotional during this performance than the initial audition, even if it's the same song. And pause the video, head down to the comments, and let me know. Let me know why you think this is happening, and then come back and I will tell you my 5 reasons. All right, here we go. So the first reason I believe that he is surrendering more to emotion during this performance is that in his initial audition, they don't know who he is. The judges don't know him. The audiences watching from home don't know him. So he knows the burden of having to do a good performance. That's what he's there for. He has to impress them. He has to move on to the next round. This is his chance to show them what he can do. So it would make a lot more sense that that strength and that need for composure would be much stronger there. The needs that we have in interactions tell me a lot as a behavioral analyst. And in this performance, he doesn't have as much of a need to stay composed because he knows that the votes are in, we know who he is, we've seen him perform, he's proved what he has to prove, so he doesn't have as much to prove. The second reason I believe this is happening is because he has someone there with him. So the burden of getting through the song isn't only on him. So think about how when you're in school and you have a group project, sometimes you allow yourself to work less hard because there are other people there working with you, as opposed to something where the entire burden of the project is on you. I think that plays a big role here. I think there's a part of him going, it's okay if I can't get through this middle part because James is going to jump in, he's got the next line. And while he's singing, I'll just try to get that composure back. The third reason, and I think this is a really big one, is the fact that this performance is different than any other time that he's performed this song. So we know that by himself with his guitar, he's played this song thousands of times. There are clips of him on YouTube playing it by himself. At the audition, he played it by himself. He's practiced this by himself. He's probably sang this at events or venues by himself. So that's the version he's used to. that version could be borderline autopilot for him. There are a lot of performers that I know, magicians, musicians, and others, that they've performed something so many times that it's almost autopilot. And it almost has less of an impact on them because they've done it that many times. But in this case, he's singing a very different version. And he's hearing James Blunt, his original inspiration for falling in love with this song, sing it. So it's not his own voice, it's not his own guitar, it's even a different backing track. We're hearing the piano, there's a choir back there. So he's experiencing this song that's obviously very important to him very differently than that version that he's done so many times. And so I think simply hearing James sing it and hearing this different version puts him more in the moment, and he's experiencing the song more powerfully. The fourth reason I believe this is making him emotional is simply the fact that this is a duet. Now, in my initial analysis of his audition, I told you that I believe Iam is spiritual. And this was due to the fact that he says things a certain way. He talks about his father using present verbs, even if his father has passed, and also due to his cultural background, which, by the way, I made a mistake in the first video. I said he's native Hawaiian. I had read a bad source. That is incorrect. He's a mix of Irish, Tongan, and Samoan. But the fact remains that, generally speaking, Polynesians are very spiritual, and especially connected to those who have passed. Now, Iam's father has passed. That is a big part of his story, and they used to duet together. They have a bunch of videos on his YouTube channel of them singing songs together. He initially got him into music, and music connects him to his father. So the simple fact, I believe, that he's duetting this song reminds him more of the experiences that he had with his father than when he sings by himself. And again, we talk about this kind of glance to his side. Of course, here he's turning to James for help, but there can also be an element there of him still being connected to his father when he performs and looking for his father. I think he still feels the presence of his father when he performs. Speaking of his father, the fifth and final reason I believe this is very emotional for him and that it actually got to him during the performance is because if we go back to his audition, he did get emotional. He got really emotional, but it wasn't during the song. It was after, when he went through, when they gave him that ticket, they said, you're going through to the next round. He was outside. He got very emotional talking about how he wants to make his father proud. That is what really gets him. So that initial audition was just that, an audition. Yeah, it's awesome. You're on American Idol. That's really great. But if he could talk to his dad in that moment, it's, hey dad, look, I'm auditioning for American Idol. And I'm sure that's very emotional because his father wanted that for him. But in this case, it's a completely different narrative. He's made it. He's at the finale. He's in the top 3 and he's singing with James Blunt. Imagine that message to his father. Hey dad, look, I made it. I'm at the top. I'm at the finale. You always wanted me to audition for American Idol. Not only did I do it, I'm in the top 3. This is what his father dreamt for him. This is what his father wanted for him. Of course, he wanted him to audition for American Idol, but only as a means to an end, and this is the end. So it's so much more meaningful to him to say, you know, I wish my dad could see me now. Or in some ways, my dad is seeing me now on stage with James Blunt at the finale. This is more meaningful. So those are the 5 reasons that I believe he is more emotionally impacted during this performance than the audition. But let's look at some other people and how they're reacting to this. So the camera cuts to Iam's mom sitting next to Jelly Roll. And if we look at Jelly Roll, we see the exact expression of sadness. We can see the droopiness in the face. The eyebrows are doing the thing where the inner corners are up. It cuts to him again later, tighter, and we could see the glabella. That's the muscle up here doing that dip. So that's what you want to see with real sadness. You see that the line up here on the forehead, it does this little dip, this little U-shaped dip. We're getting that. We're also seeing if we look at the bottom lip, it's up like this. And because he has a big beard, we can't quite see the muscles of the chin contracting, but that's what causes that bottom lip to go like this. It's the tension from the chin. And that's something we see with real grief. So this glabella, the tension in the chin, he's experiencing real grief in this moment. I don't know what kind of loss Jelly Roll has experienced in his life, but this song, this performance, is bringing those emotions out of him. He's grieving. Next to Jelly Roll is Iam's mom. And although we do see her wipe tears away, we also see something else that I've always found to be incredibly fascinating in body language. This is an expression where even if the mouth is going downwards and we're seeing the downwards mouth, sadness, there's something about it that feels positive. And it's always weird. I've always called this the sad smile because it's almost like through the sadness, we're seeing a smile. And the reason we're seeing that is the cheekbone. So usually when we're sad, everything droops. The mouth, the corners of the eyes, everything goes downwards. With happiness, it's the opposite. Things go upwards. And more particularly, the area around the cheeks go upwards. So in this case, when you look at her face, yes, the corners of the mouth are going downwards, but at the same time, the cheeks, it's so weird. I can't fake it at all. But the cheeks are still rising, even if the mouth is going down. And this is conflicting emotion. And I believe in this moment, it's absolute pride. I think the performance is making her sad, but through that, she's so proud of her son, and that's the overwhelming emotion that's coming through here. If you look at her face next to Jelly Roll, he's sad. We're not seeing sadness on her face. Yeah, the mouth is, and there are moments where it goes closer to sadness, but as we look at this moment right here, that's not sadness. She's beaming with pride. Then we have Luke Bryan. Now, a few of the commenters asked why in the initial audition I didn't spend too much time talking about Luke Bryan. It was mostly because what he was experiencing was pretty obvious. It was sadness. In that initial audition, his heart was breaking. You can just see it. In this case, there's an interesting reaction when it cuts to him at some point. He's looking over to his right, to the other judges, and we're seeing something that's not sadness. We're seeing the eyebrows all the way up, the entire eyebrow, not just the inner corners. And if you look at that glabella, it's not dipping like in sadness. It's pretty much straight across the forehead. With those eyebrows up, we're also seeing his eyes wide open. Look at those eyes. They're as open as they could be. And that eyebrows up with the eyes open is consistent with two universal expressions, and they're very closely related. It's fear and surprise. And in this case, I believe what we're seeing is surprise. More specifically, I believe we're seeing the nonverbal communication of holy shit. This is something we see very commonly, especially because he's turning to express it to someone else when we're thinking like, oh my God, wow. Wow. It's almost like he's thinking, I knew this song, it affected me the first time, but man, it's just getting me again. So he's turning it's almost like this might even be more impactful than the first one. It's shocking. It's also important to note that it's not uncommon for people to raise their eyebrows when they're trying to hold back tears. Something in our brain goes, if we go up, then things might not come down. I'm not really sure why we do this, but it's very often we see people do this when they're trying to hold back tears. The difference is when we see that, we see quite a bit of tension, especially at the bottom of the eyelid. So it kind of looks like this while we're trying to do that. I'm not ruling it out entirely. It might be part of it, but that eyes open, that kind of thing to the right is pretty unmistakable as wow. Then we have Katy Perry, who is visibly more emotional during this performance than the audition. We see her holding a Kleenex in front of her face. Her eyes are soaking wet, but they're locked on the performance and she's swaying with the melody. So she's really into it. She can't pull away from this. She obviously loves what she's seeing, but it's affecting her very emotionally. And maybe it's simply because Iam himself is a lot more emotional during this. I can't tell you why specifically this is affecting her more. What's interesting though is if you look at the eyebrows, we're not getting much. We're not getting the eyebrows of sadness. We're not getting the eyebrows up, nothing. And I think the reason for that, I wouldn't rule out that, Katy Perry gets Botox. A lot of these celebrities do. And it could quite simply be that. It could quite simply be that her eyebrows want to do that and in other situations or circumstances would be doing that, but they don't have the same mobility due to Botox. Now, I'm not saying it's for sure Botox. I'm just saying there's a possibility. If it isn't, or if I were to find out that she doesn't have any Botox, I'd be very curious as to why those eyebrows aren't moving. It's very rare to see complete stillness in the eyebrows in a moment with that much emotion. So I'd be really, really curious to know why, which is also why I go back to it very well might be Botox, because I can't really explain why the eyebrows aren't moving if it's not that. One of the most powerful moments of this performance for me is when James Blunt turns to Iam and offers comfort in a moment where the lyric is really, really ironic. So there's something weird about this song, Monsters. If you Google the lyrics to Monsters, there's a part where you'll read, on most websites, you could feel my hand on your own. In other words, you could feel my hand on your own hand. But when James Blunt sings it, whether it's in the music video or live, it's almost very clear that he says, "You could feel my hand on your arm."
My hand on your arm. My hand on your arm.
But when you listen to Iam sing it, it's almost clear that he's saying, "You could feel my hand on your own."
Can feel my hand on your own. You can feel my hand on your own.
So there's a lot of controversy out there as to whether the lyric is, "You can feel my hand on your arm, on your own." Is it both? You know, is it for James? He put his hand on his dad's arm, but Iam remembers putting his hand on his dad's hand, so own makes more sense to him. Who knows? I don't really know what the history of that lyric is. However, when that line is delivered in this performance, James Blunt unmistakably says, "Arm. You could feel my hand on your arm." As he turns to Iam, we see those eyebrows of sadness. He knows what Iam's going through here. He puts his hand on his arm and he looks at him. And look at what happens with Iam. Iam looks back at him, wipes his tears away, and just gives him this nod. Like, thank you. Like, it's basically the nonverbal communication here is James is going, "Come on, man. I'm here for you. You got this." And Iam is going, "Thanks. I got this." And he gives him that confirmation nod and picks it up from there. It's a beautiful moment of comfort. But the thing that makes that moment so poetic for me, in fact, this whole performance so poetic for me, is the history of this song. So I don't know if you guys know the history of this song, but a couple of years ago, James Blunt's father had stage 4 kidney disease, and it was looking really, really dire. James Blunt wrote this song in that moment. He thought he was losing his father, and he wrote this song for him as a goodbye while his father was still alive. But then they found a distant relative who was a match for the kidney, and they did a transplant, and his father survived. So he wrote this song as a goodbye, but he technically didn't need it because his father survived and is doing well. Well, later, Iam popularized this song on American Idol because he actually did lose his father. And this is the song that he sang as a goodbye to his father. And if I look at this moment on stage through that lens, my God, is it powerful. Because it's almost like James Blunt understands that this song that he wrote, although it's his song, his lyrics, and they're beautiful lyrics, mean more to Iam, who actually lost his father. James didn't have to say goodbye in the end. So in that moment, when James turns to Iam and gives him this courage, I just see this beautiful moment of someone saying like, you know, I wrote this song, but this is your story. And I feel that he feels that in that moment. I feel that he feels that in this entire performance. What we're seeing with James Blunt, you know, so there's a lot of critics online going like, oh, his gestures are awkward, his energy is awkward. What's the energy for this song? You know, when you sing a sweet ballad on stage, there's a nice rhythm to that. When it's pop or rock, you move and dance along to it. What's the rhythm of this? What's the rhythm of a singer who wrote a song for his dying father, singing it with a kid who actually lost his father? What's the right movement of that? There's no right movement to that. We're seeing two individuals trying desperately to get through a song. One last thing I want to talk about is right at the end of the performance, with that last line, "It's my turn to chase the monsters away." Once again, we see Iam really quickly just, you know, crumble into that emotion, and then he wipes it away and he comes back up to acknowledge the audience. I would bet that if we were to ask Iam which line in this song speaks to him the most, I bet it would be, "It's my turn to chase the monsters away." I think it would be the top one, but for sure, top 3. Like, that's where my money is. And the reason I think this is because any time while performing this song that he's surrendered to emotion, it was during that line. So in his audition, he kept it together through most of it, but crumbled right at the end.
It's my turn to chase the monsters away. Oh, sorry.
In this, the first time where he lost it and just couldn't sing at all was during that line. That's where he couldn't go on. And then right at the end here, again, we see him get hit by that and he wipes it away and he comes back. Something about that line speaks to him. And I understand that it would, right? It's our Father's job when we're little to chase the monsters away. So the fact that it's my turn to chase the monsters away for someone who lost his father is, I can't imagine the impact that line has. One thing I did notice about this performance is that at no point throughout the performance is the camera cut to Lionel Richie. I wonder why. I would love to know why. I wonder if he requested that because he knows that during the audition it was very difficult for him. I can't explain why. I would imagine he's quite emotional. In the original audition, we saw a lot of stuff happening with him that would suggest that this was impacting him. He was thinking back to experiences that he had that this relates to, probably thinking about his own father. We saw a ton of emotion on his face, even just through his eyes, despite the fact that he's had quite a bit of cosmetic surgery. That emotion was bursting through. So I wonder why during this performance, we didn't see what was happening with him. But I bet he was as emotional during this as everyone else and as much as he was during the audition. Okay, so with all this said, I now encourage you to go check out the actual performance. With everything we talked about, the history of the song and what it means to each of the performers on stage, some of the nonverbal stuff that a lot of people online seem to have misinterpreted, go check it out. Do me a favor, do come back after you watch it and let me know what you thought of the performance as well. I would love to know what your thoughts are, not just of the analysis, but of the performance through the lens of the analysis, which is the reason I did this the way I did it, because I don't want to take away from the performance. I want you to experience it as an entire performance. I loved it. I wish Iam Tongi all the best that this world has to offer. Winner of American Idol, that's amazing. His entire family must be so proud. You could just see the love online that has been generated from his success. I love to see it. I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.